Finally, it's time for you to create your own custom extension for Revit. Luckily, it will be very simple to do because we just need to create the right folder structure and pyRevit knows what to do next. You can read more about this in pyRevit developers documentation, but I'll show you everything that you need to know in this lesson. You can also look at additional extensions in pyRevit and see how they organize their tools. Since everything is open source, we have access to all the source code, and we can see and learn from others how they created their extensions. But in this lesson, let's create your own extension. I'm going to open App Data folder and create Revit Custom Extensions folder here. Inside, we'll be able to place multiple extensions if you want to. And also, don't overstress where you place your extension. We always can move it to any other location, and it should take probably 1 or 2 minutes. And the first folder that I'm going to create is the extension itself. It will be our root folder for the whole thing. I'm going to call mine LearnRevitAPI, and you can call yours whatever you would like to. But the most important part is the suffix .extension, which we have to place in the end. This should always be the same. This is necessary for pyRevit to read our extension and display it correctly in the Revit UI. And we are going to use a lot of suffixes like this. Now, let's make PyCharm and File Explorer side by side, then right-click on this .extension folder and select Open Folder as a PyCharm project. It is asking me if I can trust the project in this location, and I'm gonna click on Yes. Open this .extension folder, and you will notice that we have .idea folder here if you use PyCharm. PyCharm creates this folder whenever we open a folder as a project. I guess it keeps some kind of cache or some other data, so just leave it alone and ignore it. Inside of this .extension folder, we need to create a folder that will be displayed as a tab in Revit UI. And we can create multiple tabs within a single extension. And it might be useful if you want to separate your tools by disciplines or by some other logic. But I'm just gonna go with a single extension, and I'm gonna call it the same as my extension. I'm gonna write LearnRevitAPI.tab. Make sure you spell this .tab correctly. You can also see it appear in our PyCharm folder structure right here. So let's open this .tab folder. Next, we are going to create 2 panels. If you look in pyRevit or my EFTools extension, you'll notice that tools are organized in separate panels, such as sheets, views, and so on. So let's create our first folder and call it dev.panel, and we can see it in PyCharm as well. This is where I usually make my new tools, and once they are complete, I move them to appropriate folder. Then let's also create second panel, resources.panel. This will be useful for development, so we can store different resources, making them more accessible. Inside we need to create a folder for the button itself, and pyRevit has a few different button types, which I'm gonna show you in a moment, but the most common one is .pushButton. Inside this folder, we need to place an icon and a Python script file, and that's the bare minimum pyRevit needs to create an extension and display our button in Revit UI. I'll create a text file here, and then I'm gonna call it a script and change its file extension to .py. And we can name this file whatever we want. We just need to make sure that in the end it always ends with script.py. Now, let's open it in PyCharm and write some print statement, so we'll get some feedback when we click on this button. Now we need to get an icon. I get all my icons for free from icons8.com website. So let's search for an icon on this website. Once you've selected an icon that you like, click on download. In here, you can select your size, and again, make sure it's smaller than 96 pixels. And then click on download again. Once downloaded, place it in the folder and rename to icon.png. Now, this is enough for pyRevit to load our extension and our first button. But before we're gonna go and test it, let's place a few more buttons in resource panels. But this time, I'm gonna use URL buttons. First one is going to be pyRevit dev docs URL button, and the second one is gonna be Revit API docs URL button. URL buttons are perfect for storing links, for documentation, resources, or any other things useful for development. So let's open pyRevit developer documentation so you know where you can read more about these button types. So let's open Google and type pyRevit dev docs and then look for this Notion link. There's a lot of information here, but for now we're interested in pyRevit bundles. In here, let's scroll down to push button bundle, and it says here that it requires a script, and optionally we can add an icon and a few other things. Also, you can see right here that pyRevit can support IronPython, CPython, C#, VB.NET, Dynamo, and even Grasshopper scripts if you have Rhino inside the Revit plugin installed. Then there is a content button bundle if you want to load certain families in your project with a button click. And here's our URL button bundle that I was looking for. In here you can see that it uses a suffix of .url button, then it requires bundle.yaml file, and we can also include an icon. And here's an example what have to be written inside of this bundle YAML file. Let's create this file inside of our PyCharm. Right click here, then select new file, and we're gonna write bundle.yaml. There are a few different meta tags that we could use here, but I'm gonna start by writing title, and this is gonna be the name of the button displayed in Revit UI, and then hyperlink of the actual link that has to be opened. Now let's go back and actually copy the URL of pyRevit developers documentation, and now we can paste it here. Now let's copy everything and paste it in our second URL button. But this time we're gonna make sure that it opens Revit API documentation. Let's also add some icons so it looks better. Same as before, I'm gonna go to icons 8 and get some icons from here. Make sure that the size is correct and then bring this icon to our folder structure. Rename it to icon.png and make sure the icon is placed inside of our URL buttons. And now it's good to go. So this is the bare minimum it takes to create an extension with pyRevit. We just created a few folders with the right suffixes in the end, and then we placed our Python files with icons. It can be simpler than that. But the last step, we just need to go to pyRevit settings and provide the path so it knows where our extension is located. So open your Revit and then go to pyRevit tab. Click right here and select settings. On the bottom you will see a custom extension directory section. We're gonna click here on add folder, and then we need to look for the folder where we have placed our .dot extension. And make sure you're not selecting the .dot extension folder itself. We need a path where it's placed. Then click on Save Settings and Reload, but if you have just saved without reloading, you can always go to pyRevit tab and then click on Reload right here. Let it finish loading, and then you're gonna see your extension appear right here. And we can click on our buttons that we have just created. This one is just gonna print Hello Beam World in the console, and resource buttons will open docs websites. So everything is working well. But if we are gonna create all buttons like this, then we'll run out of space in our toolbar, and we need to be smart about how we organize it. There are container bundles that can save a lot of space in our toolbar. For example, here in my EFTools extension, you can see that it's more organized, so I can save even more space in my toolbar and place more buttons. I use a lot of pull-down menus where I can place a lot of related buttons, and also there are stacks, which allow me to place 3 buttons instead of a single one. And I can even put pull-down menus inside of the stacks. And if you are interested, you can have a look how other extensions are organized. Just hold Alt and click on any of the buttons to open this folder where it's located, and look how it's done. And this is the best part of pyRevit, because we can learn from others and see how they have done it. And you can compare folder structure to the actual look of the extension. Also in here you can see that I have bundle.yaml file. Inside of it, it says layout, and then there are folder names of my buttons without suffixes, which control the order in which they are shown in Revit. And we can use it to organize not just the tools, but also the panels and other stuff. So let's also change the order of the panels in our extension. I want resources to be always the first panel, and I want development to be the last one. So let's create this bundle.yaml file right here. Then we're gonna write layout with a colon, and on the next lines with double spaces and a dash, we're gonna write exact names of our folders. And we don't need to include any suffixes here. Also, if you have this file and you forgot to write names of one of your panels or buttons, it won't be displayed in Revit anymore. It will stay hidden. Just keep that in mind. And now I can group my button with stacks and pull-down menus. It will save a lot of space. Let's start with the stack panel. I tend to name my stack panels as column 1, 2, and so on, and obviously that stack in the end. This way I don't need to specify ordering in my bundle files. It will naturally order correctly. Then we can create pull-down menus for our documentation, and also let's create one for resources. Just move our URL buttons that we have created inside of this docs pull-down folder. And we need an icon for the pull-down menu as well, so it's not just text displayed in Revit. I'm gonna get another icon from icons8.com, and I'm gonna place it right here. Same as before, rename it to icon.png. Also, let's create another URL button in resources pull-down menu. I'm going to copy one of the existing ones, and then we're gonna modify it. Let's rename it, and now we can also modify inside of bundle.yaml file. I'll create a URL button for my LearnRevitAPI blog, where you can find different useful examples of Revit API. Then let's drop another icon for the pull-down menu, and now we can go back to Revit and update pyRevit to take changes. And it looks much better than before, and everything is working fine. But you might have noticed that ordering of the panels haven't changed. For this to change, we actually need to restart our Revit, so it changes the order of our extension. I'm going to restart mine, and once it loads up, the order will look exactly how we specified in the bundle.yaml file. And finally, congratulations! If you have followed me in this lesson, then you should have your own Revit extension by now. And you saw how simple it is to create an extension with pyRevit. And if you haven't created it yet, then I will strongly recommend you to do so, because we will be working inside of it for the whole course, and you will learn much more if you will follow along and write all the code yourself. At the moment, these 3 buttons are just placeholders. They can print some text and open URLs, but be sure to check this video next, where I will teach you about pyRevit script anatomy, where we will prepare our Python template. And it's not so hard as well, so I will see you there.